Text Analysis of Disciplinary Research Papers, Research Approach. An introduction to myself. I am Emily Carey, a researcher at the University of Bath in the UK, working for the Trend Research Group in the Department of Mechanical Engineering. The work presented in this paper is a study of the text content of literature samples to find any core defining concepts for common disciplinarities. This is an automated approach to extract and analyse the most frequent text terms being used in academic literature. In practice, the process followed includes the steps shown. Firstly, reliable samples of literature were sought to elicit the most frequently occurring concepts related to each disciplinarity. The considerations for literature samples included choosing a reliable source to cover a full spectrum of disciplines and disciplinarities. A strategy for separating into distinct disciplinary samples utilised the presence of disciplinary prefixes in the title, keywords and abstracts as selection criteria. Secondly, computational processing reduced the keywords and abstract text into usable chunks or tokens. For the keywords, a usable chunk or token included all of the words for each keyword. For example, multidisciplinary design optimization. In the case of the abstracts, a chunk of meaningful text is represented by two adjacent words, for example, climate change, to retain the meaning. Initial results include frequency counts of the number of tokens for each sample, normalised per paper to relative proportions based upon occurrences. Manual post-processing of the results eliminates similar terms, gerunds, and distracting tokens such as paper presents. This has enabled us to inspect those terms associated most closely to each disciplinarity. Visual presentation in the Venn diagrams of the most frequent concepts enables the terms most significant to each disciplinarity to emerge and a clear view where there is overlap in terms or features. The results support understanding where definitions are clearest or where work needs to continue to clarify such disciplinary meaning. Aiming for clarification. The overarching aim has been to clarify differences between commonly used disciplinarities and to understand their meanings to researchers. This is a first step in progressing to develop methods and approaches that can achieve higher levels of disciplinarity, or to discern where differing disciplinary approaches may be more suitable, particularly for engineering. Publications pertaining to specific disciplinarities have been increasing since the 1990s and more rapidly since early 2000. Increases in transdisciplinary research have been modest, but is set to rise with more recent calls for transdisciplinary work in engineering, with recent focus on socially focused topics such as climate change. More and more literature is identifying with a disciplinarity, and this is a useful tool to create separate samples of disciplinary work. Keywords are self-selected by researchers and often pertain to a single disciplinarity, but abstract text can illustrate references being made by researchers to multiple disciplinarities. This is shown in the frequently occurring terms extracted in our samples, especially for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary work. This, together with cited confusion about disciplinary differences, mean we need to better understand them if we are to increase methods for TD engineering, hence the need to establish clear definitions. Sample and descriptives. The samples were automatically processed using a bag of words model and the Python toolkit for natural language processing. For the keywords, an n-grams approach was taken to create individual tokens, and for abstracts, a bigrams approach was more appropriate. Pre-processing of text removed upper and lower cases, word stems, and common stop words such as and. The normalised ratio values shown are in rank order of most frequent occurring text term first. For example, 11.5% of the transdisciplinary abstracts text contained the concept research. Manual post-processing of the results removed misleading terms, standardised singular or plural forms, merged synonyms, nouns, gerunds, abbreviations and acronyms, reducing to those concepts that are most relevant. Reassuringly of note, the literature sample sizes reflect other disciplinarity studies. For example, the proportion of transdisciplinary work is 6.92 versus 6% in other studies. The distribution of text tokens in the samples also follows a power law distribution, meaning the top 10% most frequent terms reflect a majority of the text, thus also meaning those terms in the Venn diagrams are most reflective of the whole sample content. This work has taken an empirical quantitative approach using large samples of data, utilizing large numbers of abstracts, 9,934 in total, to create a sample of 97,456 unique term tokens for frequency analysis comparison. This strengthens the validity of the characteristics found as most frequent for each of the disciplinarities. Most frequent text terms for disciplinarities, the distinct and overlapping features. The results tables are extensive, and hence the overlap or distinctions in disciplinarity are not immediately clear. The visual Venn diagram representation enables us to better view the overlap and differences in terminology. Interesting results include the multiple overlapping features in all of the disciplinarities. Closer examination of the terms emerging here, such as approach or education, may relate to the research context of the literature sample and be expected. However, in the individual overlaps, of note is the multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary grouping, where no terms are present in the keywords or abstracts, illustrating how distinct these samples were from each other. This is interesting as it suggests that these differences are already apparent and understood well by authors. There are differences in those terms emerging for the keyword and abstract samples, and the reasons for this could be complex. This may be related to the mental models of the researchers, the publication repositories, or the personal motivation for the publications, but the reasons cannot be identified from these samples alone. A significant finding is that distinct concepts emerge for each disciplinarity. Of note, 7 are distinct in the transdisciplinary abstracts alone, such as social science, knowledge, and process. It is worth mentioning that while this representation uses the top 15 most frequent terms, increasing the frequency distances and using the top 30 text terms would present similar findings, and this demonstrates the strength of any correlations that appear. In conclusion, this work has shown significant results to understand any significant features for different disciplinarities. It is evident from the results that features do emerge either distinctly belonging to a disciplinarity or that overlap between them, and this has been a valid approach to find the most frequent occurring concepts related to disciplinarity in research literature. Findings demonstrate that there is a distinct separation in the minds of researchers about the differences between multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary work. The features of transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary work is much more convoluted, and this is an area that research could support to provide more clarification. Investigations for the future could probe text to look for associations in methods and approaches for disciplinary work to model best practice in projects. Features have also emerged that distinctly associate to single disciplinarities, such as social sciences and transdisciplinarity. This is substantiated in the larger frequency distances seen between the positions of social science in transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary, where its presence is minimal. Feature lists should now be created and tested for each disciplinarity and used to guide researchers. Steps should now be taken to examine broader literature to support investigating any features and correlations, as this may also suggest underlying industrial or research need. We need to widen the scope of understanding further by including funder or industrial project literature. These progressive works will contribute to applying appropriately transdisciplinary methods and approaches in engineering projects. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to email any questions.